Welcome to another episode of Translating Technobabble, where we aim to help engineering managers and executives understand how trending topics, technologies, and tools in the industry can impact their teams and product releases. My name is Gary Schultz, and today I'm joined by Mike Hartington. He's a developer advocate at Ionic and a Google developer expert in web technologies. Mike is also a trusted advisor to the enterprise who's been basically involved in mobile application development for almost 10 years now, Mike?
Almost 10 years now, yeah. Basically my whole entire career.
That's awesome. Thanks for being here. So today we're going to talk about hybrid applications. And so thought we'd just start by getting right into it. And what does hybrid applications consist of? You know, how do hybrid applications differ from native applications and web apps?
Right. Yeah, so let's start with defining the terms, right? So native apps, we typically describe native apps as being apps that are built using the native SDKs and the native platform tools that iOS or Android offer to developers. So for iOS, you're building apps using Swift and Objective-C if you have older legacy stuff. For Android, you're using Kotlin or Java. You're using those native platform tools as a way to build out your apps, and that's the only approach that you are using for building each one of those. And that gives you a separate native iOS app and a separate Android app that's native. Hybrid apps kind of take a crossroad approach where there is going to be some parts of your apps that are written in those native technologies and those native toolkits. And then there's going to be a part of your app that is not written that way. So if we think about web apps, most of our time we're writing the UI and the application logic in JavaScript, HTML, CSS. A hybrid app in that approach would be you have a shell of an app that is using these native technologies, and then your UI and your application logic is going to be provided by JavaScript. So you have that kind of different approach of taking two separate languages or separate toolkits and just using them together. That's really all hybrid technology, or hybrid apps in this case, are. We're just taking the native toolkit and adding a little bit more. So that way we're not writing in just one language or just one toolkit per platform. We get a little bit of reuse.
Why would an engineering manager or product owner want to build or evolve their applications to a hybrid?
So one of the big benefits that you get from going with this hybrid approach is that you get a little bit more reuse out of your code, right? The big struggle that most developers in the enterprise face is that there is separate teams that are siloed between each project. And if you're on the native iOS team, you have no idea what the native Android team is doing. You could be working on trying to achieve the same features, but you're just both writing code and both having to apply so much time and effort to working on these platforms. And there's no reshare or reuse of technologies. A hybrid approach kind of simplifies this by breaking down the majority of your investment in time. So if I'm a manager and I want to build an app, I could either hire an iOS team and an Android team, reuse my existing team, or figure out and train my people how to do this if they don't know these native technologies. But if we go the hybrid approach, we have a team of web developers. All they need to know is a few tricks or quirks about these native platforms, and they could get something a lot faster. So they are being able to get to market faster. They are being able to keep a more consistent feature set across all these platforms. And they're not having to spend so much time learning these native languages or these native platforms, or even just bringing in people who are experts in this and charge a lot of money, to be quite frank.
Yeah. So if I heard you right, it's really being able to have your web application development team actually working on native iOS and Android apps as part of their normal development process?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a web developer and they know a little bit of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, which is web development 101, they can be involved in that process and they could help you get a feature created, get a full app created, get something to market a lot faster than having to bring in a full native developer and get them up to speed.
So, what should managers and product owners consider in terms of resources, skills, tools, time frame to get up to speed when they're developing, taking this approach?
There's a few, big things to consider. First off, that you have to understand if you're going to be building for the web, it's kind of a free for all. You can do whatever you want. More or less, there are no rules. With these native platforms, this isn't really the case. There's a lot of restraints on what you can do, what you can ask for from your users, or even what should your app look like. Like you wouldn't expect to get the fun example is a drop down or a select list of every street in a district, where you're now having to force your users to scroll through that, when instead you could just have like a filterable list. So there's a lot of platform kind of quirks, design characteristics, and guidelines for how an app should behave, how an app should perform, like what is the user expectation from this. And those kind of rules and guidelines are very key to understanding on like what you should be first aware of. Like understand that you are developing for a very specific platform that has rules and has expectations that have been adapted and evolved over time. So don't try to break those platform expectations. Like you wouldn't expect to go to an app and all of a sudden it looks like your site. You expect it to go and look like an app.
Yep.
Another, thing to actually consider is performance. If you're a web developer, you're probably used to loading things up on your souped-up MacBook Pro or your desktop with however many cores in your CPU. Mobile devices are a little bit more limited in their resources. The average Android device is significantly slower than your desktop. And when it comes to loading all of that code, you still want to follow best practices of, is my app loading fast? Now I'm introducing multiple technologies. I want to make sure that the web portion loads fast and then that the native portion and that native shell stays fast as well. So there's a little bit more that you have to manage from a development side. But if you follow best practices from your framework of choice, you use the right UI library, most of that's taken care of for you.
So often I'm involved in early stage conversations where companies are looking to build hybrid applications. I'm involved in those conversations on a weekly basis. When I talk them through in a discovery, by the end of the discovery, often they're like, I think I could probably just do this in the browser. What's some good advice for whether you need a native app and how to decide that?
Well, that's a really good thing to realize. Like that makes your entire shipping experience of a product so much easier because you are going through less red tape and hassle with the app stores. Less issue and pain points with getting a native binary out to users and then managing updates. If you just need a website, 90% of the apps in the app stores, I will go out on a limb and say that they do not need to be a native app. They're just a glorified list. And you're going through, looking through all these items. And if that's all you're doing, it's okay to not be in the app store. And in fact, there's probably a financial benefit there too, considering app stores, if you want to do any payments through those platforms, you have to give a cut to the platform, right? Apple's got their notorious 30% cut. Google Play also has a percent. Unfortunately, I don't know it off the top of my head, but if that matters to you, maybe you don't want to be on that platform. The web doesn't have a cut.
Are there some criteria that we could at least talk about, like three things? Like what I see often, if you're checking these three boxes, you're probably in a native app.
Right. So I think like the big three that people kind of go to, Bluetooth connectivity. There's some efforts on the web, but they're just not there yet. And if you are working in any kind of Internet of Things or wanting to connect to Bluetooth devices or manage them even, you're going to want to go with this hybrid approach where you have some of your logic is in the web, but you're going to want to have a native binary shipped to the store.
Got it. Perfect. So that's one example. What's another good one that you've seen?
A really good one is, obviously the camera. Like same thing with Bluetooth. There is some effort there, but if you want to get the best user experience, you're going to want to have some kind of native layer in there to ship a product to the app stores. And again, you can have some web integration there, and you are creating some UI with your JavaScript, but that native experience of that camera is far better than what we can get on the web at the moment.
Got it. Okay. What's a third? Just in terms of giving our listeners some guardrails for whether it should be a hybrid or just a web application.
Right. If you need push notifications, the web is a pretty to say the least, is a very interesting platform when it comes to push notifications. So if you want that long-term kind of user engagement, where you can start sending them notifications about potential deals or just having that kind of connection, push notifications are definitely going to be a reason to push you more to the deploy to an app store versus just shipping a web app.
So, Mike, what are some common pitfalls or mistakes that organizations make when developing hybrid apps?
Probably the most important one is trying to go against platform designs and platform principles. So a very good one that I like to keep in the back of my head is people who think that their app is so unique and that they are beyond any design guidelines. And if you are one of those people, I'm not trying to insult you. Every app, these principles are in place for a reason, right? They are proven to work, and your app should follow them. You're not that unique, unfortunately. And these principles help not only the App Store keep these platforms keep a consistent experience, they help the users feel more at home when they start to interact with these apps. And the worst thing that you can do for your product is to make it feel alienated amongst the rest of the platform. Along the similar lines, another thing that they should be avoiding is trying to go with this overly complex kind of designs. Now, I know most people, when they think designs, they're either designing for the desktop, which is great and everything, but a mobile app should be simple. Like a mobile app, someone should be able to be given it, not have any context on what it is, and they should get it automatically. And that's kind of the big selling point that the iPhone originally tried to push, was that you don't need to know a thing about the technology here. You just need to know it's simple. So your products and your apps that you are building, simpler is better. If you can do like 80% of what you are trying to do and far less time in code, go for it. And you're going to create a better UI, a better kind of design and platform features for your app.
And so if I heard you on that, just to drive that home, don't go too far away from the common design patterns that are natively built or that are part of the native tools.
Not just beyond the design patterns and tools that are available on each platform, but if you're trying to fit an entire desktop experience into a web app or into a mobile app, that's not going to be a good experience. It's less about the design at that point. It's more about the flow. Like, don't have a list of potentially hundreds of thousands of street names when you, in a drop down that you have to scroll and search through, create filterable lists. If that's so much simpler, it gets the same effect done. It doesn't matter that it's not a one-to-one to the website. It's still a better experience at that point. So that's what I mean by the simplicity. Keep the experience simpler. And probably one of the biggest ones is trying to roll your own library to help you with this. Um, the amount of times I've seen people who say, "Oh, it's just a few lines of CSS and I can do this," or we already have our own homebrewed, component library or styles. We can just reuse that, and you could.
What ends up happening?
They get probably a legacy amount of code that they needed from the website to support old IE on devices that are essentially evergreen. Your modern iPhone can support your most modern iOS support goes back 5 years in devices, which is incredible. And Android, it's evergreen web views inside these hybrid apps. So you don't necessarily need to support or have the code for old IE in your native apps. It's just that's not only just not needed, but it's going to make your apps bigger, which means they're going to be downloading megabytes worth of code that's just never going to be used. So there are modern libraries out there that can help you get even further, whether it's something like Material UI from React, Angular Material, Ionic. We specialize this from day one, but there are a lot of libraries that are out there that are built to help, built to be mobile first, and that also includes hybrid technologies and hybrid apps.
At a high level, what is the roadmap or the sequence of events to building or evolving to a hybrid application?
So probably the evolution to figuring out, even if it's something for you, is answer the question: do I need an app or do I need a website? And be very, very empirical about it. Like, do I need these features? Yes or no? Do I just want to be in the App Store because? Answer that question first, and then continue on. Okay, well, do I have native iOS developers and native Android developers already available to me? If that's the case, go for it. You already have the resources. But if you're in a situation where you have limited resources, you are working with web developers traditionally, hybrid technologies are going to be your best bet. They're going to get you to the store, they're going to get you to market, and you're not going to have this uphill battle to get something there.
You work at Ionic. In this same context, what does Ionic do for development teams? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So our work at Ionic really evolves around the platform design principles, the common components, and the simplicity out of the box. So when you build for native technologies, you are building with basically a set of Lego blocks. You're not really having to find how those blocks are made. They're given to you, and you're just filling in the spots wherever you need a bar, a button, an image tag, for instance. That stuff is just given to you for free. And when you decide to go hybrid technologies, unfortunately, that doesn't always exist, or people aren't always aware that that stuff exists. And if it does exist, sometimes you have performance considerations. Ionic says, what if we could give the entire set of Legos that native developers get and just make it simple to use, but not for web developers? So you're working in that same technology space that web developers are comfortable with. But when it comes time to ship a native app and ship something to the store, you're not lost. Like, you have all the tools and all the pieces available to you to help you get from web app, native app, store, and then potentially a raise.
You guys make it easy, and we love working on projects Ionic projects every day at Briebug. So thanks for making it easy for our developers and for those that are listening. If you are considering hybrid apps, it's definitely worth taking a peek. So, Mike, if you're looking at Ionic, is there a resource you can share with the listeners on kind of where to get started with just taking a peek at Ionic technology?
Yeah, if they go to ionicframework.com, they can get started looking at the UI library and the visual aspects of it.
Is this a product owner or engineering manager and executive that would go and do this, or would you recommend just having one of the key resources and on the team take a look at this?
I would suggest engineering managers. The best way for a team to be successful is if the managers are at least somewhat familiar with what they are working with, and if they can understand what's in the realm of possibilities, they're going to be successful.
And they can help champion it. They can help lead it.
Exactly. Obviously the everyday developer is going to want to check this out too, but having that push from upper management or some kind of management level definitely helps.
Mike, thanks so much for helping me and those listening to understand what hybrid applications are, their benefits, some common pitfalls, and how to get started. And thanks to you who are watching for being with us today. We hope you found this episode valuable to you and your organization. Till next time.